Stacey Renee. I'm a mindset coach, a life coach, life on life's terms coach, and life is laughing, and the full moon was full mooning, wasn't it? So, yeah, give y'all a few minutes. Feeding these algorithms is we're going to be feeding the algorithm of the inner child, adult child wounds, adult child of dysfunction, adult children. Children learn what they live. That's what we're going to be talking about tonight, and about how we unlearn what we live sometimes, and some of the turning our survival skills to tangible tools. That's what we're going to be talking about. Have my water. I'm ready to talk about it. So apologies for my tardiness this evening. My name is, like I said, Stacey Renee. I'm a mindset coach. Thank you for that thumbs up. And so I do one-on-one coaching. If any of this appeals to you and you would like one-on-one coaching for yourself, as I'm speaking to a large range of people here. There's my girl. I know you were worried. I'm sorry. I got a phone call and it's like, oh, I got to get off of here. So, yeah, but I'm here. I'm here. Thank you, darling. Thank you. So, yeah, I just was kind of filling in some space while we wait, because I know a few people. Rodolfo is going to be here this evening. And so, yeah, working on things. Let some more get in here. We're going to talk about, what I was talking about the other day about children learning what they live, having that plaque hanging up in the house. It was hanging up in my house when I grew up, but it didn't mean that it was the guideline for our home. It may have been for like 5 years, even though it was carried around. My mama had it up until I am okay. Thank you. My friend that's taken the van away, she my sister, she she got pulled over in Texas. She got pulled over in Texas. So that was funny. She had a funny story to tell me, and I got all involved in this story. She was fine. She didn't, yeah. Ramon, how are you? I look forward to seeing you tomorrow. Tomorrow. So, did y'all have a good day? Hello, everybody. My name is Stacey Renee. We got a few more in the house, and I know y'all know I'm Stacey Renee, but I'm Stacey Renee. I'm a mindset coach, a life coach, life on life's terms coach. Life is laughing. Aw, that's sweet. Sweet. Life is laughing, and the full moon was full mooning, wasn't it? Oh, so yeah, it's going to be getting better now. All right, everybody. So we're going to be talking about children learn what they live this evening. John Van Floyd, greetings from England. All right. Well, welcome. Thank you for coming in from England and saying hello, John Van Floyd. So we're going to be talking about children learn what they live. This was a plaque that hung up in my house, and I'm going to read it to you all. And then we're going to finish this evening with I've desiderata tattooed on my arm. And in English, that means things desired. Because we get to, thank you. So we get to learn where we're growing from. We're always, sometimes we can be running to and running from things, running from and running to things. But, getting to regulate is something that we do also at the end of these lives, is because knowing that everything's in right and divine order. That was the thing about my friend getting pulled over. She found out some information that she needed to know in order for things to happen. And everything was fine. She wasn't in trouble or anything. It was just that, yeah. So changes and evolving. And how do we change and evolve? We may have these plaques that hung up in our house. We may have had these ideas of how things were supposed to be, but they might not have been that way. And how do we grow from there? And it's, first off, acknowledging we can grow from there. Just because we get in these adult physical bodies doesn't mean that we quit growing mentally and emotionally. I always tell people we're building mental muscles and emotional stamina, because I think that we think as children that we have those conceptions that I'm going to know everything once I get older, and I'm going to know so much more, and we do know a lot. Wisdom does come, and especially like as we age, and that's part of, we know that we're evolving as we have aged. So I'm going to read this children learn. How many of you, first off, before I start reading this, how many of you have heard this poem before? It's a poem by, let me look at the bottom so I get her name right. Where is that? Where is her name? Dorothy Law Nolte. It's a poem called Children Learn What They Live. And so it kind of breaks down a lot that happens. You know, I've talked to you many times about the book, What Happened to You, you know, with Oprah, and that Dr. Bruce D. Perry wrote about what happened to you when people go to the doctor instead of saying, what's wrong with you? Because a lot of us think there's something wrong with us. All right. Well, thank you, Ramon. She's amazing. So what happened to us, you know, and where we are at today is a result from where we were yesterday. And so when we can get conscious of how this is making, thank you for those thumbs up. Is that you, Kim? Walking and thumbing up at the same time, and you ain't even hitchhiking. All right. So here we grow. Here we grow. I'm going to read this poem to you by Dorothy Law North. Is it Northe? What is it? Okay. Anyway, it's called Children Learn What They Live. All right. Thank you for those thumbs up. So I have my notes here so I can read your comments too. Hi, Bug. So children learn what they live. If a child lives with criticism, they learn how to condemn. If children live with hostility, they learn to fight. If children live with ridicule, hi, Rodolfo, have you heard this poem before? It used to hang in my house all the time when I was a little kid, and my mom had it for a long time. I don't know if she still has it because her house burnt like 3 years ago or something, but she had it for a long time. So I'm going to start over. You've heard it before? Okay, I don't need to start over. If children live with ridicule, they learn to be shy. If children live with shame, they learn to feel guilty. You know, I've talked about unearned guilt here. If children live with tolerance, they learn to be patient. If children live with encouragement, they learn confidence. If children live with praise, they learn to appreciate. If children live with fairness, they learn justice. If children live with security, they learn to have faith. And if children live with approval, they learn to like themselves. So if children live with acceptance and friendship, they learn to find love in the world. This was by Dorothy Law Nolte. So, but what if we do not live with some of those things? What if, you know, we get in our adult strategizing, survival skills and strategizing, and we're always in this, well, what if this happens? Well, what if that happens? Our strategizing. Have you ever heard that before, John Van Floyd? So sometimes we get into this what if, and we're using our creativity for the negative of what we don't want rather than what we do want. VP3X. There you go. So what if a child lives with fear? They learn to be afraid. And sometimes they grow up into adults who are afraid of other adults. You know, someone mentioned the other night that I made a video about, you know, punishing other adults, because sometimes that's what people do based on this type of learning growing up, is they think that that's okay, and it's not okay to punish other adults. Praveen Kumar. All right. Well, hello. So if a child lives in mental, emotional, and physical hunger, desiring those things, when we look at the desiderata, things desired, they may learn to be hungry for attention and love. So they may sell themselves short, right? So, and so on and so forth, you know. So I've got my notes here. Thank you, Kim, keeping the thumbs up. So this can be hanging in a person's home and them still not feel secure. Just because you got some handy dandy plaques hanging up in the house, it doesn't mean that you're going to have a secure house or that you feel secure. Because it hung up in my house and I did not feel secure. I can tell you that I didn't grow up with a lot of criticism. I don't even know what that means, Praveen Kumar. So anyway, the reality is that some parents dealt with the same thing, or maybe they tried to do better. Most of us tried to do better than our parents, you know. But the thing is what I've talked about before, is we can't heal our children from our wounds. They didn't have our wounds until we gave them to them. And so sometimes, Trey, you made it. Howdy. It's good to see you here. So we're just talking about the poem. Trey, did you ever hear the poem that Children Learn What They Live? It's by Dorothy Law Nolte, like Nick Nolte. So anyway, when, just because we have these nice poems hanging in the house and everything, it doesn't mean that that's necessarily the way that the house goes. So, yeah, so being able to embody things sounds good. Okay. So, I'll get back to my notes. Thank y'all so much for being here. If you have not subscribed yet, please consider subscribing if this kind of resonates with you. John Van Floyd, I'm 57. Now parents both died. I was 9, and I've had to place the pain in a box in my head. But your words are good. Past, present, and future exist all at the same time. I love it. Yes, John Van Floyd. That's, our quantum field, right? Yay, Angie T. I'm glad you made it. Y'all, Angie T saw the video the other day where we were saying who was missing and roll call. I think it was Sunday. So, yes. John Van Floyd, I'm so happy that you're here, and I'm so happy that these words resonate with you. And I hope that you'll stay for the whole thing, because we're going to get into solutions too, because a lot of us, sometimes we can just feel so alone, because these things do stay stored in a box. And it's funny that you mentioned that, because hopefully you'll get to watch that Sunday one, or might have been Friday night, because I come on Monday nights and Friday nights at 6 p.m. Central Standard Time. And I come on Wednesday mornings and Sunday mornings at 9 a.m. Central Standard Time. So in one of those, I talked about how we're not in that box anymore. Our lives might have been limited and in that box because of some childhood issues, some childhood things, because we might not have received the things that were said on the plaque. And what happens is that we get grown, and sometimes we may feel inadequate when we didn't receive those things. Sometimes we may feel insecure. I know I'm speaking for myself, is that I still felt inadequate and I still felt insecure, even if I had a plaque hanging in my house that said all these nice things. so one example can be, if a child was abandoned at birth, they may vow to never abandon their child, but in turn go to the other extreme, the codependency and enmeshment, is that their children may know too much about their lives with their partner. Thank you, John Van Floyd. They may know too much about the lives with the other parent, and they may try to take responsibility or try to rescue a parent. So this sometimes happens to where a child becomes overly responsible in the family. And so we don't know that that's happening. We don't know that that's happening. And I talked in the Sunday video about how it's just like, well, this is just the way that I am. We kind of accept that as our lot in life, and that's just the way that we are. But when we get out of the box, we start realizing that life is so much more expansive. So, but we just don't know how. It's not that anybody's stupid. It's not that anybody's lazy, although we may title ourselves that, because if you grew up in a house that didn't encourage you, they might have, had these other little kind words for you, verbal abuse. And you may be experiencing verbal abuse as an adult with a partner, or even your grown child, your ex-partners, or your parents. Sometimes, and even with jobs, is sometimes people will talk crazy, disrespectful. Sometimes they'll go for the jugular, and so with their verbal abuse. And so we don't need to subject ourselves to that. Guilty of telling things to my child and stepchild that I shouldn't share. Absolutely. And sometimes that's, like I was saying, we it can be, it's really us coming from our childhood pain, typically, because no one means to harm, but it's not everything's our kids' business, and the kids don't need to be getting in our adult business. And so they need to have their own lives. We want to bring our kids up to where they get to experience their own lives. So swift and quick. Well, here we go. Back to the notes. It's pretty natural for us to, want to help our kids not experience what we experienced as a child, because we didn't have the resources. So that's why this happens, is that if a child was abandoned and then they overshared, but here's the deal, that if you might have overshared with your child, then when they have a child, they may not want to do that. So they're going to try to protect their child from that oversharing and being too involved, so their child can be a child. But their child may still get mad and think that they got left out of something. It is so hard to tell. Verbal abuse is worse worse cyclical because it causes emotions are tied to mental programming. Once you program abuse into a kid, it's hard to unlearn. It really is. So we're going to get into on down here, Trey Jones, about talking about how we gently parent ourselves, because you're never going to get an apology sometimes from a parent, partner, or a child who has verbally abused you. John Ben Floyd. Yeah, I grew up in the children's home, but I've lived with self-doubt, not confident, but still there. I believe in a higher power looking over me like a guardian angel. I'm so glad you believe in that. I believe in that too. Is that there's somebody looking out for me. And when I go through these changes, challenges, and chapters in my life, and sometimes it's not easy. Sometimes not every, sometimes people are not on your team. And so sometimes you may feel alone, but just to keep doing it and doing it anyway, you know? So that's why I get on here and do what I do, is so that I can encourage other people who may have experienced this. Stuart, I got custody of my two kids in 2008 from their mother. The court granted me custody after she was arrested for serious crimes, and I put them through school. Good, good. I hope that they were able to get some kind of healing, because kids oftentimes, when I got divorced, we went to court and they now tell you don't talk about the other parent to, poorly to the children, because children take on that identity. So it's really, children are absorbing so much more than we realize. And you as a child absorbed so much more than anyone realized. Our parents probably would have done better if they would have known better. And now we just have so many more resources. And I'm glad you were able to do that. That's very important. And, so long as, as we're doing it for the child. I know that sometimes children get grown. You may be sacrificing, putting them in the best schools and doing all of this, and then they may come back and come sideways and verbally abusive at you. Because now we got this thing where some people are saying, I hate to use that term, so I'm not going to. I look back and think how I have got through my shit, smoking weed, alcohol, and etc. I did that too until I did, and I'm going to have 20. Y'all already heard, I know, but it's quite an accomplishment. Hello again, Link. So it's, I'll have 29 years on the 14th of this month. 29 years without any drugs or alcohol, because that was my coping skill. I didn't learn how to cope healthy to mental, verbal abuse, and all these kind of things. And I didn't know what to do. And the learned behavior for me was coping with drugs and alcohol too. I don't know if it was for you, John Ben Floyd, but I saw it, and it's like, okay, first we know that food, I can cope with food. My daughter is 25 and works for a home builder. My son is 28 and is very close. You did a great job. I would be very proud of him too, Stuart. Good job. Very good job. See, that's the thing, is you set them up so they had good tools when they grew up, not survival skills, sounds like. I have coping mechanisms too. Yes. Thank you, Ramon. Thank you. Yeah. It hadn't always been easy, and life didn't just turn out to have rainbows and butterflies all the time just because I'm sober. But there was nothing happened, even including the loss of my son, that I needed to put some alcohol and drugs on. That's how we show honor for our love, is to continue living a life that's interesting. John Ben Floyd's 3 names in one shot. John Van Floyd's. Yeah. Very cool, isn't it? So, we're talking about security. Prescription pills, my coping mechanism. Yeah, it's a lot of people's coping mechanism. Yes. Angie T. Yes, girl. Yes. So the example, I talked about that, it's pretty natural for us to want to do better. If our parents were all codependent, then we want to have healthy boundaries with our kids. The kids may get such good boundaries, they are all twisted off at us and things. I don't know, talk crazy, but we just never know. So we talked at length about many survival skills and the need to transform them into tangible tools. Because here's the thing, is we carry a lot of shame. That poem talked about shame. Thank you, Logan. No, I didn't go to the spa. So that poem, we talked about shame. And so the survival skills. So we've probably done a lot of things trying to cover up that shame, because we have to heal the shame. The shame won't go anywhere. See, that's the thing, is a lot of us try to perform to keep from experiencing the shame, to develop our self-esteem, and performance is a good thing. That's where you learn some tangible tools. But the problem is if you're too focused on the negative side, thank you, Kim. If we're too focused on the negative side, the don't wants, and I'm just not wanting to, this to happen, and I'm not just wanting that to happen, because what if this happens, and what if I do this and this happens? That's strategizing and anticipating how somebody else is going to behave. I believe we meet the right people at the right time in life, the synchronicities and etc. Exactly, John Van Floyd. I love synchronicities, serendipities, and it's just amazing when those things happen. And it's like you get that feeling to your whole core. And it's kind of like that quantum field jump, right? That quantum level. And I've had this happen before. When I got to go to Spain last year, I felt that feeling because that was something that I desired to do. Again, we're going back to things desired. That was something that I desired to do. So focusing on, once we can heal our trauma, those negative tapes, the things that we said to ourselves, because if somebody verbally abuses us, the chances of us verbally abusing ourselves is highly likely. This is where we get in the dialogue of I can't, when, maybe if we weren't supported, then we don't know how we can. Because a lot of times children didn't get supported in doing children type things, right? And so if you didn't get supported in doing childlike things, then sometimes our dialogue may say, I can't, when we don't know if we can or not because we haven't tried, right? So I give alpha female. I've heard that, and I've learned, Logan, that it's not my deal if somebody else feels intimidated. That's you, darling. And I'm not trying to be, but I've learned that is that I'm not intimidating. Am I, Kim? Now people know that I'll call people out, but I'm not intimidating. But I can be intimidating to people. So I'm not denying your reality, but right, Kim? So John Van Floyd, I read lately, there's no coincidences. Good, good. Link, Stacy, you're a very beautiful woman. I'm now realizing this in your beloved smile. Let me stop. Well, you're very complimentary and flattering. Thank you very much, Link. Hey, Angela, we're so glad you're here. We missed you on Sunday, so thank you. I'm glad that you're here. Angie, the countryside of Spain is, yes, it is. I'm going to be in Valencia, so I'm looking forward to it. John's and Stuart, I was a middle child and I survived. Yes, I was an oldest. Thank you, Kim. Thank you. Yeah, I do. All right. Hello, beautiful mama. How you doing? So we've talked at length about the many survival skills and the need to transform them into tangible tools, finally giving ourselves where credit is due, credit where credit is due, because turning these survival skills, see, this is the importance of experiencing your feelings, because then we get to understand what was the fear and the feelings. You're the middle too, that's mad. See, this is what I love on here is you all get to relate with each other, and I get to relate with you too. So I am so proud of this community. Hi, Mom. So getting to do this, finally giving ourselves credit where credit is due, because I'm going to get further into this. Let me pay attention to my notes and not get ahead of myself, or it's going to be all. So the reality is that a parent, even a spouse, coworker, or your own children may never see you as you are. They may never see you as you are. I have a friend, my best friend, and she's like, I am so happy. Thank you, John. She's like, I am so happy that I got to know you, because she doesn't have children, of her own and everything. And so seeing the pain that I go through having a child, and also seeing that I am another person, that I was a person before I had children. I'm a person after I have children. I'm not just mom, but sometimes our children just think we're just mom, and they don't know. And sometimes it could be your parents think that you're just my kid, and they don't know. And sometimes your boss may think you're just a worker, and they don't know. And sometimes your partner may think that this is your job. This is, and they don't know. So getting to know and take that journey to ourselves is the best adventure we're ever going to take in our whole lifetime. Hardaway the Sparky. Link. Floyd, Vans, and Johns, are we in agreement about Stacy glowing? Alrighty. Well, thank you. Angela, narcissistic family members only want to see the version of you that they can control. Absolutely, Angela. That is true. That is true. They know they don't care. I don't think that they know that they don't care. It's just that they're so hyper focused on their own agenda that they don't see you, they don't hear you. And, that's it sometimes, And I'm not saying all, it could be family, because I know my mom is up in here. It could be family, it could be your partners, it could be your own children, it can be your coworkers. Some people are committed to not understanding you. Right, Angela? And we may find that the lesson in life, because even with a narcissistic person, that narcissistic person has taught me how to be strong, because many people fall for the narcissistic. And I'm not trying to use that term loosely. Makes for a very lonely place. Yeah. So many people will fall because people with the narcissistic personalities are very charming in the beginning. And if we don't know about love bombing, then we can fall very susceptible to love bombing, And then what happens is there's a guy, what's his name? Something Garrett. He's got a Scottish accent. He's a big guy. I forget. His name begins with a G. And he talks about narcissism here on YouTube and that addiction. And we talked about how that works is in relationships, the weak floor. You're right. Like, I am not here to find a husband. No, darling. So what it does is every time you're with that kind of personality, you get a dopamine, cortisol, serotonin, you get these hits. All these chemicals are being released, and you really want the good chemicals to come back. So this is what makes it addictive to be in a relationship with someone who may have what we consider narcissistic traits. Somebody with that chase, that anxious and avoidant attachment. Sometimes it's just anxious and avoidant attachment, but sometimes it's narcissistic and codependent. Sometimes it's, there's labels, but really the reality is that it's a chasing behavior, that it's like, I want you, I don't want you. And I've played part in it too when I was young and immature. I've played my role in that kind of behaviors. I want you, and then when I get you, I don't want you. But then when somebody else wants you, I want you. And that's very emotionally immature, Y'all know I ain't on here to date or be married for sure. So anyway, back to my notes. So the reality is that a parent or spouse or a coworker, even your own children, may never see you as you are. You're the distorted vision of the character they assign to you, right, Angela? It's the distorted vision of the character they assign to you. They won't even get to Kim. So, the distorted character. Y'all are funny. That's why I have notes, so I can laugh and then look back at my notes and stay on topic. So sometimes that's pretty handy for them when you start considering wait, where am I in these notes? Okay, so sometimes it's pretty handy for them, or inconvenient when you start considering yourself. They may take issue with that. They may take issue because it's been handy for them, for you not to consider yourself, for you just to be doing what they want you to do. Hello, MH Bach. Angela, narcissistic parents only want you to play a role because absolutely, but that's the same with the husbands, wives, co-workers, and the kids. And it's sad, some kids grow up to be narcissistic kids too, and yeah. Link. Stacy, the truth is dating become very difficult finding any. Yeah. How did you know I liked Elvis Presley, John Van Floyd? I did like Elvis Presley. Elvis Presley taught me how to dance. I could dance before I could walk. So there you go. Hey, Mark, thank you for reminding me. Today's topic is children learn what they live. And what is that? You know, because we had a plaque like that growing up in the house, and we weren't the only ones. A lot of people may have that plaque, but is that really what you live? Is what's on a plaque? Sometimes people have families, and like Angela's talking about, if you live in a narcissistic family, they want everything to look good on the outside while no one's communicating on the inside of the house, or if they are, it's thrown off, right? And so narcissists make you believe that self-abandonment is love. They sure do. They sure do. They will have you fighting their fights, and then after you fight the fights for them, if you get pulled in, then they'll say they didn't do this, they didn't say this, or they'll take the side of the other thing what they pulled you into, their drama. And it's crazy making. John Van Floyd, I still watch him on YouTube. Aloha from Hawaii concert, cool legend. Yes, I got to see him when I was like almost 12 years old. And I got to go to Graceland a bunch of times. But yes, I still watch Aloha from Hawaii sometimes too. And the other ones, This Is Elvis and these other things. I love me some Elvis. Stuart Gorman, fortunately, my children surpassed my standards. My children were very brilliant. My children, I think, were smarter than I was. And I worked hard for them to do that. I worked hard for them to do the things that I didn't do. Now, I lost one and still have one. And sometimes she likes me, sometimes she doesn't, because I'm a mom. And I've always been a mom and not a friend. So I have been a friend too at times when she let me, but they're going to have their own ideas and own visions of us sometimes. So, oh, happy day, Drilla. Yay, it's been so long. Well, welcome, John. You're so jealous. Oh, about Elvis? I know, right? I was very lucky. My grandpa worked spotlight for the Tarrant County Convention Center in Fort Worth, Texas. Is the narcissist concept a little bit overvalued? In the end, it's trauma, isn't it? Even trauma over generations. Absolutely. I'm glad you brought that up, Mark, because it is. A lot of people say, and that's why I try not to be flippant with it. And even with narcissist personalities, although we may be hurt by that, it requires healing. And see, they're a catalyst. Like for me, the narcissists in my life have been a catalyst for my growth. I'm no better than they are. I don't consider myself any better. So I want to make sure that we don't get stuck in those kind of things in my teachings. Sometimes I have people that come across and I'm like, well, what do you mean by that? Because sometimes people won't talk to people if they're not believers, right? And so this is an exclusion. And that's not what I think that source, whoever we perceive it to be, the higher power, right? John Van Floyd, the higher power wants for us is to be saying, well, you do this, and we don't have the right to judge anybody. I'll be talking about that here in my notes, but I don't feel like we have the right to judge anybody, but we don't have the right to hurt anybody. And the narcissists have been deeply wounded to where they're in overprotection mode to a degree where they could be considered bullies. They could be considered hurtful and painful, and we don't need to subject ourselves to that, but we do not need to make it any worse. It's not going to make us a better person to say, oh, they're a narcissist. It's good if we have a friend that's been involved with them to say, well, this is what they do. More so naming the behaviors of the narcissist, which they have their typical behaviors, right? When they find out what you like, first off, there's the love bombing. We can watch any video on narcissism, and they can tell you what the actual traits are, because a lot of times we hear the word when it's being thrown around a lot, oh, they're a narcissist. Well, it's not just people that we don't like that are narcissists. Some people we don't like, maybe we had the wound that they have now and we've outgrown that wound and it makes us uncomfortable to be around it. Or with the narcissist, it is uncomfortable behavior and you don't know what you're going to get. We have a guy that I know around here, and it's like, you don't know if the grizzly bear or the teddy bear is showing up, because he can be thrown off. So it's like, it's not any of the guys in my life. I just see him and it's like, oh, the energy. We talk about energy. Where are we going to place our energy? And so narcissism is really painful. It's painful for the person on the receiving end, but the person who's distributing it out is in pain too, because most of the time they've been overlooked. So they're trying so hard to be seen that they have to overpower. and they've been misunderstood, so they have to make sure that they misunderstand. So when we're talking about children learn what they live, oftentimes that narcissistic behavior was learned, and so I like to think of that narcissistic relationship that I had, or relationships, because I have had them in personal relationships and at work. And it's like, oh, you know, a friend of mine and I were like, we thought we were, when we had a work narcissistic relationship, not with each other, but with someone else. And we're like, we thought we were through with that, and so it's like, was another level of learning, to spot red flags. And that's not to go into trauma mode, it's to make sure that you are setting boundaries with yourself, not to subject yourself to an opportunity to experience some pain. How about that? So, yeah. So they have a distorted vision of you. And sometimes the thing is why I like to say this is because sometimes we had a distorted vision of them. That's why I don't like to name it as the victim and the villain. Because a lot of people could say, oh, the narcissist is a villain, but we had a distorted picture of them too at one time, because they weren't who we thought that they were. And most of us want to feel tricked. But once we learn to recognize these things, then that gets to be the catalyst, right? Is then we don't have to participate in that anymore, or we're able to see it sooner than we did before, right? So it's all about our growth. It's not about, I can't grow with, put somebody down and lift myself up at the same time. It's like, I'm not going to participate in that behavior, and I may have to go no contact, because live in gray rock. These are terms that if you live with someone with narcissistic personality that are not natural, and it eventually will make one sick. But I went off on that, didn't I, Mark? Kim, I think. Oh, I know. My children were smarter than me too. Angela, why did I lose one of my children? It was a tragedy. So, yeah, it was why I lost him. So, just because and going back to children learn what they live, they don't always do what we may model. My dad, it's so weird how these things happen. Like, my dad was an addict and I was an addict too, and I didn't want to be an addict. I did not. I watched my dad struggle with food addiction. I watched my dad struggle with drug addiction. Alcohol is a drug, but a lot of people want to separate it. But alcohol and anything else. There was also sex. He was a womanizer, and there was all this. And my dad used to always say, I want to set an example for you. And like for 5 years, I think this is probably where this plaque in our house came from, was that for 5 years, he, didn't use drugs or alcohol through religion. He got religious. But the problem is that we still don't get to take a look at our own sins, even though we may take a bath in some water, and, but we may not realize where these fears come from. And so the shortcomings are spawned off from our fears. So that's what happens is that when I get in fear about this, I may self-sabotage. So as I read on in here, we're going to be talking more about how this self-sabotaging happens. So hang in here, John Van Floyd, because I got a lot more to come. It's envy. Mark, what do you think about sociopaths and borderline sociopaths, if you've ever heard of that definition, maybe? Well, I'm not a clinical psychologist, so I don't have much experience with all of that. So I probably don't need to say too much about that. I believe that, we have to be very cautious, because not everybody, especially this day and time, mental health is a big deal. And so it's still about not harming somebody with mental health issues, but also having boundaries with yourself first, so that you can have boundaries with someone with mental health issues, compassionate and loving boundaries with someone with mental health issues. But it's very important, because I don't know much about that, Mark, but what I think about is Carl Reiner, and his wife and their son with mental health that ended up killing them. Because you've got to be very cautious in approaching these things, because not everybody who has somebody in their family with these kind of issues will do that. But really, if anybody suspects those things, there's so much on here about that we can get some information. But I'm afraid I'm not a clinical psychologist or psychiatrist. I'm a coach. a coach. And if y'all want coaching one-on-one, then feel free to email me. So, having lost a child also, my heart beats with yours. Thank you, Stuart. It is the most excruciating pain that there is, and yeah. So, yes, I lost my son in a tragedy, and he used what I was saying was that he used drugs, even though he never saw me. I made an amends, like, I am sorry I used drugs. He was almost 5 years old when I quit drinking, because drinking was the last one on the block. That was the last one. Was I had food addiction, so I did drugs trying to lose weight. And then when I lost weight, I wanted love. I wanted love. I wanted a boyfriend. So then I got into love addiction and codependency. Well, I didn't know it was codependency, and I didn't know love addiction was love addiction. But of course, I was in love with addicts, just like my dad, because that's what us girls do sometimes. And so I fell in love with addicts, and so I went to the program for that. But I wasn't as hardcore as they were, because really I just wanted to smoke some weed and drink some beer, or wine, whatever. So I wasn't as hardcore, and so I looked at the principle, the steps and principles, and I thought, oh, okay, I got it, because I thought those looked cool, but not the people. So then I went off. But addiction is continuing and progressive, no matter which addiction that you are in. And then there's the transference of addiction, because people who didn't learn how to cope will seek relief. And we don't even know that we're doing this. And I didn't know that I was doing that. So then I got into alcohol, because having two kids and weed isn't legal in Texas, not like that, And so I wanted to be normal. I always wanted to be normal, I thought, but I still don't know what it is, but I don't care anymore. But anyway, then after that, I ended up, with a love addiction. I got a partner, and then we had two kids, and then I was drinking, and then I drank too much. And so I was in blackout. So then I had to get help with that. And then I found out that then after I got help with that and I quit drinking, what I escaped to shopping. Then I got in shopping addiction, but it still didn't fix. Just because, I talk about the only if disease. Just because I quit drinking, just because I quit doing these things and got married and got a kids, and I mean, I was driving a minivan. I looked like a normal, but I was not feeling normal on the inside. I was self-loathing. I was self-loathing. I did not like myself. I looked in the mirror and I picked myself apart, and so again, body dysmorphia, but it can be even just looking in your own face and your own eyes and feeling the deadness there, the deadness. And so, and I should be enjoying my life. I had two beautiful little kids, and I didn't want to hurt my two beautiful little kids. And so I got sober, but then I started shopping to fill that other hole. I was working my steps on my sobriety, but then I still had to deal with life. I still had to deal with this husband. I still had these two kids, and I still was trying to be normal, because I still wasn't normal. I didn't relapse on the alcohol, but I did, shop so much and got so mad, because what I did was, when I didn't know how to handle conflict and confrontation, y'all. And so when I got upset, I bought myself something nice for my pain. So I ended up divorced and bankrupt and a single mom. That's what I did. So then I found out I was codependent. Then I started going to therapy. And so I found out I was codependent. So I started working on my own codependency. And, everything falling in right and divine order, and those synchronicities and serendipities. And sometimes divine order has us slinging snot and down on our knees. It doesn't always look like the sunshine and rainbows and butterflies. And so when I lost my son, I did not have to drink, because I had worked on my codependency, knowing what was my business, God's business, and somebody else's business. And I also got to know about my expectations. That being an appointment with disappointment, having expectations. And I also got to know that it's not all about me, that I can't save everybody and everything, not even my own children, because he ended up using. And even though he never remembered me using, but so he ended up using. So sometimes it's pretty handy. Back to my notes. Stacy, have you ever had your face drawn or painted by an artist before? Your colors work well with. Oh, okay. Well, thank you. That would be cool, wouldn't it? Rodolfo. Thank you, Angela. So we've taught people to love themselves, situational ethics, and many other ways that breed narcissism. Wonder what happened. Absolutely, Stuart. I do believe that. I have a friend that, sometimes our daughters are mean to us. And we're like, she's like, I don't know what happened, because we did give them more than what we did more for them than was what was done for us. And so I told her, I said, well, we taught them that they were more important than we are. That's what we did. And that's what we got. So Clint, flying demons is real. Okay. John Van Floyd, my father committed suicide. My mother died from epilepsy, but it skips a generation. So I chose to not have kids. The odds were high. Yeah, John Van Floyd. That's tough too. So that's the thing, is that sometimes we may romanticize about someone else's life or idealize, and we all go through something, and that's excruciating pain too. Yeah. I know for me, what I learned with my journey was to grow through grief with grace. It was that I was given grace. And I shared that before, is that I don't know how I got through it, but I got through it clean and sober, and it was grace. It was grace. I would just wake up and be like, today is March 7th. Today is March 8th. And I would get up and I would walk, and I didn't forget. It's not that I forget. I'll never forget. It's just that I have to get up, and I still had a daughter that I needed to take care of. You know, I needed to be present. I couldn't die too. There was a part of me that died. Anybody knows that there's a part of you that dies when you lose somebody close like that. Maybe your father, your parents. There's going to be a part that goes, but honor. That's where the grace comes in, was I was allowed to honor these people by staying clean and sober. Because I know my son used to tell me, he was 18 when I lost him, and he used to tell me, because he did things I didn't approve of, but I still loved him. And our words were always, I love you. And so he would tell me, though, and I would be like, you're doing what? He'd be like, quit tripping, Mom, quit tripping. So I knew that when I lost him, I could hear him telling me, quit tripping, Mom. So that was 15 years ago. Rob Reiner, yes. Thank you, Ramon. I appreciate that. John Van Floyd, it skipped me, but my kids are I know it does. It can go from generation to generation, or skip a generation, like you said. It really can. Sometimes we're not all, I don't know in my next lifetime if I'm going to have kids. Fell in love with addicts. Good man you rejected, right? Unfortunately, when I was immature, I did reject some good men because the addiction felt familiar. So that's the thing, is that when addiction feels familiar, a person who's used to that kind of thing they won't feel good enough for the good man. But now that's changed. But it took for me to grow in emotional maturity. Because once I quit using, even though I was another age, we're not going to talk about my age, that we don't talk about that on here. But I was the maturity level that I was when I began using, because when I began using, so let this make sense, because that's what we do when we come from trauma or have trauma, is we try to make it make sense. So what happened is that when I began using because I didn't know how to cope with some things, and I, had learned coping. There was the learned coping behaviors of addiction. And so when I couldn't cope with things, when I didn't know how, or when I wanted to be cool, or what my perceptions were, which were framed by that, that's where I escaped to. So really I escaped. And so when I escaped, I was escaping normal feelings, feeling my feelings and growing through my feelings and developing maturity through growing through my feelings. So when I quit using, I had to be the same age. I was really the same age that I was when I started using that for coping, because I still hadn't learned how to cope. And that's why I'm telling you that an addict will still seek relief in a transference of addiction when we don't learn how to cope when we're younger. And we're not going to do it a one and done and say, oh, I got it, I'm fine, that's all right. We may slip back into another addiction or the same addiction. So it's important to have support. So that's why I'm so grateful all you are here this evening, because y'all are very supportive of yourselves, of me and each other. Rodolfo, yes, he's being supportive. I like that. I have this diagnosis, borderline one, and we found out accidentally while I had depression. It's being different wired in the brain, but still have cognitive empathy. Around 10% of people have that. Yes, yeah, that's true. And they often get borderline and bipolar mixed up. And so they're both, though, where it's a chemical. It's not that people can, it's not like narcissism. Narcissism is a learned behavior, but it's also something that's not a chemical. It's not a chemical, it's a learned behavior, where that is a chemical thing. Clint Norris, AA meetings is where I met my dangerous girlfriends. Well, there's dangerous girlfriends in and out of those rooms, Clint. That's true, because I've met some dangerous boyfriends in the AA or NA, and yeah, but I've also met them up in the church too. I have. I had about 3 boyfriends from the same church, and you do not see me sporting any of those either. So, but it was a fun time while it lasted. It hurt when it hurt too. All right. So back to the notes. So part of the growth process is for us to learn how to gently parent ourselves. Did I finish that last paragraph? Oh, this is important. Let me go back to the last paragraph. See, this is why I have notes. So sometimes it's pretty handy for them when when you start to change it, they're going to take issue. So as long as you've been handy with the way that you behaved and it fell under their spell and their control, but when you start to have boundaries with yourself and them, they are not going to be pleased probably. So if you've considered what you want and your actions are not out of spite, see, considering what you want, what do I want? Because a lot of times people don't realize, what do I want? So when you get to consider what you want, your actions aren't out of spite. If you're not saying, I want to do this so I never have to see them again, or I want to do this so I never have to rely on them again, or I want to do this, so then they will be over there saying, look at her go. Or maybe, those things. Those things. If you do it out of spite, it's probably never going to be good enough. I don't know about y'all, but I used to do stuff out of spite. Again, when I was emotionally immature, I would do things out of spite, and it never made me really feel better. In fact, it helped me second guess myself even more. So I had to learn to get an intention and motivation. This is something that I also learned in those dangerous AA meetings. But to learn my NA intentions and motivations. First, my beloved. Okay, let me make sure I'm caught up. Blackouts are wacky. I had them too. I had them, and I was afraid of what I would do in them because you never knew what was going to happen. Link, it's almost impossible to imagine you've gone through all this, Stacy. I know. It's life on life's terms, so that's why I say I'm a life on life's terms coach, because life will be lifing. All right. Right? Who is normal? I don't know. I didn't even notice what he's saying, Link Kumar. I don't know what he's saying. John Van Floyd, you are a strong woman. Good for you. Thank you, Mark. I guess, Stacy, you just tried to find balance. Well, I tried to find harmony. I did try to find balance. At one time, I used to talk about balance. And then COVID came. And I'm like, what? Balance? Because I would be making out schedules when COVID came, and I didn't have a schedule. And I considered a schedule and structure balance for me. That's what I thought was. But so I started having to come up with, you know what? I just want to be in harmony. So I really am focused on harmony. And, I've got a program called the self-trust reset, and it talks about the ego and the soul integration into harmony, because the ego tries to protect us, but it also gives us our drive, and the soul is more squishy and loving, but it also gives us our direction. So learning to put those two together so that we're driven and also have our direction and not second guessing ourselves. So yeah, out of spite, then it's time to get comfortable with others' discomfort. So if you're not wanting to change out of spite, it's time to get comfortable with others' discomfort rather than regress and go back to the old ways. Okay. Thank you, John. Kim, sorry everyone exercising and listening. Crazy comment. It's all right, Kim. I didn't even see it. Hi, Thunder. John Ben Floyd. It's an internal war, drugs, etc. Yes. We're just looking for to escape or distract or some, Rodolfo, their phone. Angela, we can't control other people and circumstances. We can only control ourselves. Absolutely, Angela. That is so true. Yeah. And that starts with having those boundaries with ourselves and having loving boundaries with ourselves. So I'm about to start talking about the gentle parenting, gently parenting ourselves, because when we get into this negative self-dialogue, it may have came from a parent, it may have came from a spouse, it may have came from someone else, it may have felt like you don't deserve your good, made you feel like you don't deserve. So you may tell yourself, I don't deserve good. I don't deserve this or that, and that's not true. That's not true at all. So it's learning to tell ourselves something else and to gently parent ourselves in a program of ACA, adult children of alcoholics, but it can be adult children of dysfunction. They talk about this gently parenting ourselves, giving a new dialogue, because maybe, there's some people, I want to say kids, but they're adults, because we have that inner child still in us. And some people are still trying to impress the parents that they could never impress, or trying to impress the potential partners that they felt like they could never impress, or trying to impress the boss that they could never impress, or trying to impress, and they get stuck in these fights. So the fight is really with ourselves and things. So part of the growth process is for us to learn to gently parent ourselves. It's not just omitting the past for a fantasy. It's not just saying your past is a fantasy. It's about acknowledging your inner child and that lost their voices ages ago. If your inner child lost its voice, and many people's inner child has. And so it's about getting comfortable, not trying to cover up the ego usually tells us not to be vulnerable with other people or they're going to hurt us, right? So it's about learning who you can trust and just trusting one person, whether it's a sponsor, whether it's your coach, whether it's your therapist, whether it's your psychiatrist, whether it's your clergy, or you've got a good friend who has it all together that has what you want. Because don't listen to people who don't have what you want, because there's a lot of well-meaning people who will tell you what you need to be doing, but they're not doing it themselves. Armchair coaches, as they call them, right? So it's not just omitting the past for fantasy. It's about, okay, so being heard doesn't mean shouting, y'all. It doesn't mean shouting. If you have another adult shouting at you, I feel for you, because you don't deserve that. No one deserves for another adult to be shouting at them. See, this is why some people, though, fear other adults, right? So it takes courage to speak and stand firm in your truth without quivering. That takes courage. I told y'all I was afraid of conflict and confrontation. And I had to face different levels and layers of conflict and confrontation to be able to talk, to be able to speak my truth. It took practice and development. That's what I always suggest, is practice and development. Not being too arrogant, but not too submissive, right? So that's where harmony is, in between that. Not being submissive, not being arrogant, but in harmony. Harmony is about honoring, So when we honor ourselves, we honor someone else. We're not going to, start talking crap about them when we walk away. Angela, John, and I didn't want to bring children into this dark world. Lots of evil on this planet. That's people's rights when they don't want to bring children. I don't know if I'll have children in my next life. Like I said, okay. All right. Rodolfo, this is like mental health version of back when I went to Overeaters Anonymous meetings to feel thin. Yeah. Colorado. Okay, we're not going to talk about that. Robert Highland. This may be off topic. No, I didn't see that. I don't watch much TV, so I'm not familiar with that show, but that's sad. That really is. John Ben Floyd. It must be awful, Stacy, but you're dealing with it. Bless you day by day. Thank you. Thank you, John Ben Floyd. Nadine. Hello, Nadine. Much love and respect back to her and just person, John. Patrick, take a. Okay. Rodolfo. All right, y'all getting silly. John, good souls have evil disguised in alcohol, drugs, etc. Follow us like a shadow. Yeah, I'm not so when I look at the inventories of back in the day when I participated in those things, I was a piece of work, and I'm so grateful for recovery. John Van Floyd. I know some of these comments. Some of these comments, y'all. Hello, Dixie boy from England. COVID was a curveball. It sure was. Don, it's glad you're here. Grinch is in the house, but he'll probably come out in a bit. You drink water, John Van. I'm like that negative dialogue in the head, but now when I get out of bed, I say, I'm going to have a good day. And sometimes I do. Positive thinking. Yes, it does help. And yes, our ego plays a big part in our lives. Angela, we have learned to see ourselves through the eyes of our narcissistic parents who couldn't love us. Yeah. So it's changing that dialogue, changing our dialogue, getting up saying, I told you I used to have I am good enough on my mirror. All right. So I'm going to get back into the notes. I've looked at the comments. So, all right. So we may need to recall and recalibrate when we're shifted in the extremes, with not being arrogant and not too submissive. We may need to recall and recalibrate because it may be our first thing to go to. Learned behaviors take a while to unlearn. And so, when we recall and recalibrate when we shift to the extremes, not to judge ourselves, but to remember we're taking the baby steps to bring comfort and an acknowledgement to our inner child without self-sabotage. See, that distraction and that avoidance is oftentimes self-sabotage. So knowing, awareness is the removal of obstacles, and an obstacle is when we distract and self-sabotage. And so knowing when I'm self-sabotaging. Don, I worked in supermarket during COVID, lost many colleagues and caught it after the jab. The way people behave was disgusting. It was just different. I'd never experienced like that anything in my life. Now I'd like to talk about harmony so that we're not judging other people. None of us have the right to do, so talking about that. So self-sabotaging behavior, in case, awareness, like I said, is a removal of obstacles. A lot of people are doing practicing self-sabotaging behavior and don't even know. I didn't know when I was, thank you, William. I didn't even know when I was, it does affect your mental health. It did affect a lot of people's mental health. I feel for the young people because I didn't grow up in a thing like that. And like was talked about by John Van Floyd is that these things, I don't know how the young people, it's definitely going to affect their nervous systems for life. So self-sabotaging behaviors is when we do things out of spite. Okay. We will end up disappointed and not feeling accomplished like the folks we may be trying. What are you doing, Grinch? Your audience is in here waiting for you. So, self-sabotaging behaviors when we do things out of spite will end up disappointed and not feeling accomplished like the folks we may be trying to spite. It could possibly feel like never enough. Sometimes we are living, working with, or have people in our life that we feel like we can never do enough for. And those are not our people. They may be our people, we can still love them, but we need to understand that we are enough. Like I said, I put that thing, I am good enough, on my mirror, and it helped me to remember that when I was faced with issues and trying to figure out, and give my power away. So this is how we end up in negative spirals and toxic loops. When we think about it a lot, a lot of self-sabotage was born out of us trying to prove something. I'm going to prove this. I told y'all when my dad used to call me selfish and self-centered when I was 14 that I would be trying to prove that I wasn't and be giving things away. I taught people that I would just give them things if, and I wasn't still out, the idea is in our virtues, we want to be generous, but I didn't have my intentions and motivations measured in value. Okay. I was trying to prove something. So sometimes there's other issues where we're trying to prove something, like from the negative self-dialogue. If we've carried this negative self-dialogue, I'm not attractive enough, so this person does this, or I'm not enough here, so this person does this. So we will actually try to prove that because that's what we're familiar with and used to, and we don't typically aren't wired to think that way. So that's why we have to consider other possibilities in that gentle parenting of ourselves. So Like I said, self-sabotaging behaviors when we do things out of spite, we'll end up disappointed and not feeling accomplished like the folks we may be trying to spite. It could possibly feel like never enough. So this is when I talk about, like, I have people sometimes that say, "Are you a believer?" You know, when I'm working with them, I'm thinking, well, what does that mean? Because a lot of people only want to associate with people who believe the same way that they believe. And if that's a believer, then I don't think that's me, even if I did believe the way they want to believe, because I don't want to be where I'm trying to exclude people if they're interested in working with me. You know what I mean? And so I'm not just sticking with one group of people. Same is when some people are really spiritual and they're like, well, now that I had my spiritual awakening, it's like, well, we're not above anybody. Humility is, not being better or less than anyone else. And that is harmony. That's harmony that I talk about. So if we ourselves develop toxic behaviors, we need to cancel them, like judging another person's worth. Who are we to judge? No one needs our approval. They do not need our approval. We can do our preferences with discernment is, what I prefer not to be around, drama and chaos. That's okay, but we don't have to label them or look down on them. I like the saying, we don't look down on anybody unless we're helping them up. So if we ourselves develop toxic behaviors, we need to cancel them, like judging another person's worth. Who are we to judge? No one needs our approval. We talked about discernment and how we can gravitate more to our new comfort zones without thinking we're ahead of someone else. I think of humans, I think as humans, one of the greatest underlying fears is being judged, right? Isn't that one of our greatest underlying fears? They say public speaking is one of the greatest one of the people's biggest fears. And why? Because that's we're afraid we're going to be judged when we're doing public speaking, right? So my empathy, wait, I missed that comment from John. Oh, my empathy, I have been seen as weakness and not quality. It's shitty. We have to have boundaries with empathy too, because some people will, when it serves them, they're going to accuse you of being apathetic. Some people will try to put you in a box like that, is that if you don't do what they want you to do, they may say, oh, I thought you were more empathetic, or if you don't co-sign their story, they may say, because a lot of people with it, you're not just having your own negative dialogue. Sometimes when you're dealing with people who are committed to misunderstanding you, they have their own negative dialogue. You cannot get in their head. They have their own negative dialogue, and they are waiting for you to prove what they think you think about them so that they can point the finger, or, and put you up on, have this imbalance, this fragmentation. Angela, when you stop trying to get other people's love and approval, you are free. That's absolutely true. Let's pin that one. Thank you, Angela. So, see, when you start thinking, I don't need to approve of anybody, you realize nobody needs to approve of you either. Just be you. You are beautiful as you are. So I think as humans, one of our greatest fears is being judged. So when we fear what another thinks of us and begin getting defensive and take that on, that is also self-sabotage. And we may be triggered to defend ourselves when we think someone's thinking something about us. But if we do that and don't play the tape through, we buy into another person's painful perception of us. Does this make sense? So if I think, oh, well, they just think I'm just here to cater to them, then I'm giving myself a low self-esteem, because I'm assuming, what they say about that. I'm assuming that I know what somebody else is thinking, and I'm thinking that they're thinking something less than me. Now, they may think that, but that's not my business what somebody else thinks about me. How do I think about me? How do I feel about me? And that's where your self-esteem comes from. Thank you, Don. Okay, so does that make sense? So not taking what somebody else thinks of you on, because sometimes that's indicating self-sabotage. That's indicating self-sabotage, your negative self-dialogue, because that's feeding negative self-dialogue. If I think that someone's thinking something negative of me, and if I don't want to ask them, then I need to dismiss that thought because I don't know what they're thinking. See, we do well to know what we're thinking ourselves half the time, right? So, so we have so many thoughts in our, our brains like the data in our phones. There's just so much going on there. So they may say something painful to you that's coming from their pain. I just recently experienced this. Somebody said something to me that was painful that came from their pain. Rodolfo, my dog lived to be 17 and she was blind and she walked around the house and I was just grateful for every day I had with her. But, I did get to see her. She had arthritis and I felt bad for her. And finally, she passed at 17. But each day you get with them is a gift. So, yeah, people may say something painful to you that's coming from their pain, and you do not need to defend or deny their pain if they are committed to that belief system about you, and you will know what that is. The same kind of argument, different day. So some people will keep coming at you with the same argument, different day, and it's coming from their pain, and you don't need to keep defending yourself, same argument, different day. You don't need to play into that. So that is a commitment to see you in a certain way, no matter what you say. So you can try boundaries, but with some, they will not work. So you may need to gently parent yourself and say, well, this hurts, and I'm not going to subject myself to that. Now, when you do this, we need to know that if we've done our healing work, because sometimes people may say things to us that they may not be trying to say something bad to us. They may just be saying something and we may have a trigger from an old wound. So it's important to be able to process that. Are they legitimately saying something mean to us, or is this a trigger from an old wound? Because like that data in the phone, those old wounds are still there. And if we haven't healed them yet, then we need to process it. So oftentimes things come up just so that we can process it and see it a different way. John Van Floyd, I'm easily manipulated. I didn't notice for years. I know, right? We don't know because I've talked to, I hope you'll catch some of my other videos. We've talked about some of the roles that we will get manipulated to play, and it may have started in childhood, and it may have started later on in life. But sometimes we get manipulated into playing these roles and we don't know who we are. And sometimes we turn into a chameleon to get approval, or, and sometimes we are the manipulator. I learned that in my people pleasing that I was a manipulator because I wasn't really letting people get to know me because I didn't know myself. Hey, Robbie, because I didn't know myself. You're still on the old schedule, darling. We are an hour ahead of you. But I'm glad you're here. We're not done yet, so I've still got a little bit more time to go. And as usual, I will thank you, John Van Floyd. I hope you'll subscribe if you haven't already. But and I have a review at the end of this, Robbie, so you'll get to catch up. So now when we do this, and okay, I see some separate and divided because they place themselves above another, where it be their spiritual journey or kindness. The reality is our sins don't make us better than another person. We don't. I'm not talking about drastic sins, y'all. I'm not talking about your murderers and these terrible sins. I'm talking about our regular old things, our regular old defects, protective mechanisms. I'm talking about how often self-sabotaging and to be self-righteous. Some people self-sabotage to be self-righteous, to put themselves above somebody else. Okay, great. Thank you, John Van Floyd. Angela, narcissists project all their flaws onto you, and that's why you don't have to care what they think. Absolutely. That's exactly what they do. Is if they say this about you, then that's probably coming from their pain body, right, Angela? And just because, you can say, oh, they're in pain, but that doesn't mean to subject ourselves to that. It just means to, dust our feet off and walk away. So I'm talking about how often it is that self-sabotaging to be self-righteous. Well, it doesn't mean condoning bad behavior. We don't need to judge it either. We have a saying in recovery, just let them make it, just let them make it. Because sometimes we find, in recovery that somebody may come in like, you have some years, somebody may come in at 3 months and they're learning so much at one time. They want to start telling everybody how to do it. and it's everybody's personal journey. It's not, everyone's got their own journey. That's why there's so many people in it, because there's somebody for everybody. But you just open your peepers. Well, good. You got some blessed rest. So we say just let them make it. We're not going to tell people that they don't know, that the whole journey of recovery when they've got 3 months. We're just going to let them make it, because sometimes people, well-meaning people, will be telling you how to do things, and they don't know. They don't know. Hey, Kai fam. So we have a saying in recovery: just let them make it. It's compassionate and humble, remembering we were once unhinged, maybe too. I know that I was a piece of work back in the day. So we just don't hang around bullies and let's not sink to their level. We don't have to participate, because that's what they want. They want this narcissist, like Angela's talking about. They want you to participate. They are trying to bait you to participate, and you have to not participate. That's having that loving boundary with yourself and with them, because they would love for you to participate. Thank you, Fraggle Rock Pothead. John Van Floyd. I had a chiropractor treatment, had my third eye open, pineal gland, and my intuition is sharp now. It's wacky, but you see things in people you don't want to believe. Absolutely. That's right, John Van Floyd. And when people tell you who they are, we need to believe them too. But yes, I'm glad you mentioned that. I have the Eye of Horus tattooed on my foot. And the Eye of Horus is shaped like the pineal gland. Rayer. Hello, Rayer. How are you? John Van Floyd. Hello, Robbie. Yes. Rayer. We don't want to participate in bad behavior. All right, John Van, my falling star. Thank you very much, my falling star. I appreciate that. All right, too many trying to tell you what to do discombobulates the brain. It sure does. And sometimes they aren't, if they aren't living, I've had people who did not have the kind of lifestyle that I wanted to have telling me what I needed to do. And it's like, okay, thank you. I know you're well-meaning, but I'm not going to do that. I always, I used to be jealous of people, but I learned to not be jealous if they have something that I want, to learn how did they do that, because if you want what somebody's got, you got to do what they did, is what I learned. Rodolfo, John, turning a blind eye is my weakness. You see it sooner or later, it just hits harder. So also the breathing we're going to do here at the end helps with your pineal gland, because all this, when you give oxygen to your brain, the pineal gland, the hypothalamus, and the pituitary glands all thrive. That's your intuition. See, expectations and intuition are two different things. And when we haven't healed from some of our pains and we're looking at the anticipating and strategizing, we may mistake that as intuition, but that's expectation. So we just don't want to hang around with bullies and sink to their level, and we don't have to participate in bulliedom. That's what I was saying. All right. So it goes back to what I want and not giving people power to rent space without our approval. We don't need anybody's approval rating. Don't let people rent space for your approval. Thank you, John Van Floyd. All right. So as you gently parent yourself, you will not look back on your childhood or other painful events with judgment after you've learned how to distinguish your survival skills from your tangible tools. You get to live more freely and fully in your childlike state. When I go for a lot of walks over here, sometimes I take my friends on Facebook with me, right, Kim? But I go for a lot of walks, and I'm in that childlike state of wonder, of being able to walk the streets freely and wonder. I'm not in a hurry to get anywhere, and I just get to go and wonder. And I never know who I'm going to get to see or say hi to or run into. It's fun. You side with dry drunks. Okay. All right. Placeholder opinion 3 on. Okay. I don't know what all those are about. I don't know those placeholders. So, okay. So, as you gently parent yourself, you will not look back on your childhood or other painful events with judgment after you've learned to distinguish your survival skills from tangible tools. You get to live more freely and fully like in your childlike state. So getting out to walk in nature, riding a bike, swimming, it doesn't have to be grandiose. It's just these simple things. When we clear the pain and cobwebs, we get a clearer picture of who we are and our childlike wondering self. In that state, remembering having the freedom to play, being able to play outside, being ourselves, hobbies are more, being able to do things safely without judgment, because when we quit judging ourselves, hobbies become more fun. People don't ask much about hobbies anymore, do they? I'm not sure people would consider them. As always, I look forward to hearing your thoughts on this. I want us to close with the Desiderata poem I have tattooed on my arm before we head into our breathing. But first, I'm going to recap what we've talked about this evening in case you were late. Yep. Well, we got to get with the people that share our values, but we don't look down on those that don't share our values. John Van Floyd. I'm near a beach here in Scarborough, England. Good walks. Ah, that is great. I have a beach near me too. Angela, as humans, we need participation. All right, Ray, I don't know that what John Van Floyd, we lost that freedom when we were kids. It's a shame. I know, but we can still do it now, because I get to, like you, I get to walk by the beach. Sometimes it rains and I get to, just take my sandals off and play in the rain. It's letting go of learned behaviors. So to recap for tonight, children learn what they live. What is that? What is it? So tonight we explored how the powerful truth that children learn far more from what they experience than what they are told. That's what we talked about. You weren't cross-talking. That's cool. Rare. I always participate. It's okay. He wasn't saying it. Okay, he took his comment back. Okay. Always show empathy. Yes. Okay. So we explored how children, learn a powerful truth that children learn far more from what they experience than what they're told. So Dorothy Law Nolte's poem, Children Learn What They Live, reminds us that when children grow up surrounded by criticism, shame, fear, hostility, or ridicule, those experiences become the lens through which they see themselves and the world. Likewise, when they experienced encouragement, fairness, acceptance, security, and love, they develop confidence, patience, faith, and self-worth. But life is rarely perfect, y'all. So many of us did not receive all those healthy foundations. Some grew up with fear, abandonment, emotional neglect, or environments where love felt conditional. Well, I got something for you. There you go. Hi, Shanakia 7. All right. So, some grew up with fear, abandonment, emotional neglect, or environments where love felt conditional. Often our parents were carrying their own wounds and survival patterns, doing the best they could with what they knew. As adults, we begin to recognize that many of our survival skills were created to help us endure difficult circumstances. I am doing well. I hope you are too. I know I had to put one out. Sure enough. As adults, we begin to recognize that many of our survival skills were created to help us endure difficult circumstances. The challenge is learning to transform those survival skills into healthy tools that serve us rather than limit us, right? Because we're not living in that box no more. So part of healing is learning to gently parent ourselves. This means acknowledging the inner child whose voice may have been silenced long ago and giving ourselves the understanding, encouragement, and compassion we needed but may not have received. Y'all are doing good. Thank y'all. Rayer, Angela, and John Van Floyd. Yeah. So, okay. It's not about pretending the past didn't happen. It's about honoring our experiences without remaining trapped by them. So we also discussed self-sabotage and how many destructive behaviors are rooted in trying to prove our worth, gain approval, or defend ourselves against judgment. True healing happens when we stop seeking validations from others and begin living from our own values and truths. Not everyone will see us clearly. Some people will continue to view us through old stories, labels, and distorted perceptions. Growth requires becoming comfortable with other people's discomfort when we choose healthier boundaries and healthier ways of living. Yes, I would pick who I love. I would. So, healing also asks us to let go of judging ourselves and others. Discernment is important, but self righteousness creates separation. Compassion reminds us that everyone is carrying a story and fighting battles we may not understand. As we continue healing, we rediscover the freedom, the curiosity, and the joy that belong to our authentic, childlike self. We reconnect with simple pleasures, creativity, hobbies, nature, movement, and play. We remember who we are beneath the wounds, defenses, and expectations. So we're going to close with Max Ehrmann's poem, Desiderata, Things Desired. And this is how I try to live my life, and so it's really helpful. It does describe this freedom, and it helps us to understand the paradoxes of life and that it's not personal, but the way we're affected by it is personal, and so the way we respond is personal. So I just want you to, as we do the breathing this evening, to take in these words. So I think we'll go ahead and breathe, then I will read that poem. Rare. You can pick who you love with the person with the person that pick you back. Yes, it's a mutual. You want a mutual relationship, not a one-sided. So we have to accept that some people are never going to grow and we have to leave them behind. Exactly. That's true. That's true. Freedom, Jimi Hendrix. Yep. Yep. You're a shy guy, Rare. All right. So let's go ahead and do our breathing. Then I'm going to read Desiderata for y'all. So I want you to calm, be right here, right now. So let's go ahead and do our breathing. So let's take a deep breath in, and I remember breathe in beyond a wholesome discipline. Be gentle with yourself. So let's breathe that in. Take a deep breath in, fill up your tummy. We're going to do 5 of these breaths, okay? No, y'all are still typing. All right. Now, so I'm debating, do we want to breathe now? Do we want to breathe now or breathe after the poem? You are very welcome, Angela. Do we want to breathe now or after the poem? You're breathing? All right, let's breathe in, darling. So let's take a deep breath in, fill up your tummy. We're going to do 3, and then we'll do 3 at the end. How about that? That's what we'll do. All right, so let's do 3 breaths. You breathe in, hold it for, whatever's comfortable. I usually do 4, and then release gently and slowly. All right. It's kind of like when you're having a baby. Yes, sometimes we're rebirthing ourselves. So just think of you rebirthing yourself beyond a wholesome discipline. Be gentle with yourself. And there's the Grinch. The Grinch is here, ready to breathe, y'all. So here we grow. 3 breaths, and then I'm going to read the poem. Then we'll do 3 breaths, and then I'm out. Okay? All right. So let's just take a deep breath in. Hold it. Release. Breathe in. Hold it. And release. Breathe. Hold it. And release. All right, now I'm going to read you the Desiderata poem. It's an amazing poem. Oh, thank you, Angela. All right. So it starts with, go placidly amidst the noise and haste, and remember what peace there may be in silence. As far as possible, without surrender, be on good terms with all persons. Speak your truth quietly and clearly, and listen to others, even the dull and the ignorant. They too have their story. Avoid loud and aggressive persons. They are vexations to the spirit. And if you compare yourself with others, you may become vain or bitter, for there will always be greater and lesser persons than yourself. Enjoy your achievements as well as your plans, and keep interested in your own career, however humble. It's a real possession in the changing fortunes of time. Exercise caution in your business affairs, for the world is full of trickery, but let this not blind you to what virtue there is. Many persons strive for high ideals, and everywhere life is full of heroism. Be yourself, especially do not feign affection. Neither be cynical about love, for in the face of all aridity and as disenchantment, it's as perennial as the grass. Take kindly to the counsel of years, gracefully surrendering the things of youth. Nurture strength of spirit to shield you in sudden misfortune. But do not distress yourself with dark imaginings. Many fears are born of fatigue and loneliness. Grinch, your fan club's talking. Hold on, Grinchy's got to go to the bathroom. Nobody needs to see that. Beyond a wholesome discipline, say hello. Beyond a wholesome discipline, be gentle with yourself. You are a child of the universe, no less than the trees and the stars. You have every right to be here. And whether or not it's clear to you, no doubt the universe is unfolding as it should. Therefore, be at peace with God, whatever you conceive him to be, or her, and whatever your labors and aspirations in the noisy confusion of life, keep peace in your soul. With all its sham, drudgery, and broken dreams, it's still a beautiful world. Be cheerful and strive to be happy. So it's things desired. So what you want. Thank you very much, John Van Floyd. Thank you. I appreciate it. Sometimes it's green, sometimes it's not. Don says hi, Grinch. I know, but he's not very nervous. He's only nervous because he doesn't have a partner. Shinakia 7. He runs this house. He's not nervous. Shinakia 7 says hi too, Grinch. And Pam, hello, Pam. We are almost done, but you're going to get to breathe with us. You are very welcome, Angela. Thank you for staying. Thank you for being here. So y'all just remember to breathe that in. You have every right to be here. You are no less than, hey, Robbie. Say hello, Robbie. Oh, no, I don't mind you asking, Don. Grinch whistles. Grinch can whistle, love you. That's what Grinch does. Whistles, love you. Sometimes Grinch whistles other things, but he mostly just whistles. He doesn't talk very well. Sometimes he says his name. Thank you very much, Ryan Van Wyck. I hope I'm saying that right. Ryan Van Wyck. I appreciate that. That's a beautiful name. I've been out there saging for 2 nights, Pam, and I'll get out there and sage again tonight. The blue moon is the second one this month. That's why it's called the blue moon. Did you see the video? It's the second one this month, so it was further away, but I got out there the night before last and saged, got out there last night and saged. He does like music, Don. I do not have a poodle. John Van Floyd, I will sleep well tonight. Hope you are safe and well. And I know isn't this a great community? Thank you all for being here. All I get is thumbs, no hearts. I don't know what they did with the hearts, Kim. I don't know. Thank you so much for moderating. Thank you, Pam. I'm glad you got to come in. You're going to breathe with us. Yes, because remember we go on at 6 now. So yeah, but thank you. Hopefully you'll get to do the rewatch. Are y'all ready to breathe, darlings? We're going to do 3 more breaths. We did 3 before I did the poem, Pam. Did you get to hear the poem? So maybe I'll post the poem in the comments or something, okay, y'all? Or in a post for tomorrow. Yeah. It's okay. I only put 1 out, but yeah. Thank you, Robbie. We appreciate you. All right, y'all. Good. Thank you for rewatching, Pam. Manjaro Journey with Pam. Y'all, if you haven't subbed to Pam, then I said, you know, if you would like to, that would be a good thing to sub to Pam. She's got her 1,000 now. I don't know with my subs. I was up to, I only needed 3 more, 2 more, 1 more, I think, to get 1,100. So I know my bird's always talking. Thank you all so much. Thank you so much for being here. I love and look forward to seeing you all here every, Monday and Friday night. And also I'll be back on here Wednesday at 9 o'clock Central Standard Time. So I hope that you all will join me then. If you not, then you can catch the video later. This is what I love about YouTube, is that I go on, like, you had so many steps. I'm so glad that you got your steps in though, girl. We did fine. We did fine. Yay! Thank you, Pam. I appreciate that. I appreciate you, Kim. I appreciate you so much. Thank y'all. And everyone who's here tonight. Robbie, Angela, Rodolfo. Thank you all so much for your comments. And John Van Floyd, welcome, welcome. Thank you. And thank you for subbing. Who did I just see that just subbed? Thank you so much. All the new subs and those who, have subbed in the past. I appreciate you. Thank you. All right. Let's breathe, darlings. 3 breaths, and then I'm out to go meditate. Okay? Y'all are great. I had to rhyme with that. All right. So let's just take a deep breath in. We're going to do the 3. Breathe in. Hold it. And release. Breathe. Hold it. Release. Last one. Breathe in. Hold it. Release. All right. Thank you so much for being here. And if y'all ever have any ideas of a topic you want me to cover, please just put it in the comments, or you can email me. Kim, we love this community, don't we? Yes, we do. See, we're all getting so familiar with each other. It's so cool. Grinch is breathing too. Grinch loves the breathing exercise. Bye, everyone. Y'all have a good night. Yes, Grinch loves it. Thank you, Pam. All right, y'all take care. See y'all Wednesday. Wednesday. All right. Bye, Robbie and Pam and Kim. Kim and Ramon, thank y'all so much. All right.